All right. I see we've got a few folks in the room already. Well, once again, thank you for taking the time out, everyone. And good morning or afternoon to each of you, depending on which time zone you're on. My name is Omar Amjad, and I'm from the CDW Professional Services team. My practice area is really around cloud infrastructure and AI. And we're going to try to make it really interesting for you today. This is a top of the mind topic for most of our customers that we talk to. We want to make this super interactive. So if you've got questions during this presentation, please drop them in the chat. My colleagues over here, Bhupinder and Sylvie, are on the chat just waiting for those questions. And I've left an ample amount of time at the end of this where we can just take those questions and walk through scenarios. You feel free to get off mute and we can have a chat as well. So like I said, yeah, today we're tackling this critical question. What happens when malware strikes? And this is not about fear. It's more about being prepared for such an event. Our goal here today is to show you how to use Azure to build real tested resilience for your organizations. And our hope is you'll leave knowing how to protect your operations, your data, and your brand as a result of this discussion today. Cool. So let's set the stage. As it pertains to the growing malware threats and the landscape, the game has changed quite a bit. The attack vectors have shifted quite a bit, and prevention alone is no longer enough. Some stats for you, there's about 20% year over year growth when it comes down to ransomware attempts. That's continued to accelerate every year, every quarter. But it's really the how that's scary. These are no longer any simple viruses. The threat we're facing is perpetrated by human-operated campaigns. They're dedicated and their sole purpose is to carry out such attacks. They tend to be very patient. They can hide in your network for 9 months or beyond, and they use that time to learn their system. And typically, the initial compromise, it often starts with something very simple. We all know those phishing emails that one of our employees or colleagues will end up clicking, or there is a bustling market of stolen login credentials on the dark web where they will purchase and try to infiltrate using those. And like I said, they don't make a sound when they're in the network. They'll kind of quietly hang around. They'll explore the network. They're really looking for any weak points. This could be months and weeks. They're really mapping out critical systems, finding out really the crown jewels of your organization, like your financial data or your customer database or CRMs. And they're trying to identify the administrative powers within the organization. And the next step, they will typically neutralize your defenses. And this is a critical step. Before they launch the sort of main attack, if you want to call it, they actively hunt for your backups, your disaster recovery systems, and they would either delete them or they will corrupt them. So this kind of removes the safety net that most organizations are relying upon in order to protect them in such a scenario. Once that's in the bag, next step is to execute and extort, which should be, once they've had the full control, they've taken away your ability to recover, they trigger a ransomware attack, thereby encrypting your important files and your data. And then it'll generally end with a ransom note demanding payment to get your data back. And these payments are generally received in untraceable funds like BTC or Ethereum and so on and so forth. And this is extremely common now. Bottom line here is we must assume a breach is coming. That's the stance. That's the posture most prepared organizations start out with. And interestingly enough, the ransomware note or the ransom tip itself is just the tip of the iceberg. The real cost for businesses is the downtime. The average cost downtime is about 21 days of being non-operational as a result of these malware attacks. Now you can think about, depending on how well prepared you were, 21-day being a mean point, it could be far more than that for some organization. And this is, costing in thousands of dollars per minute, depending on the business you're in. It's typically catastrophic. And the crisis on all fronts, which is financial, you're losing revenue. There's massive recovery costs, even if you were to overcome such a thing. Data is typically compromised, it's stolen, and it's potentially lost forever. And reputation. Customer trust is damaged. I think we've all been on the receiving end of such emails. A good example comes to mind in Canada was Life Labs, and their data was compromised, and that was HIPAA data, health-related data for all their customers and paying customers and patients. And then there's the legal fines and compliance nightmares and audits that ensue following that. So really the key takeaway is that ransom attacks are not really just an IT problem. It's potentially a business ending event. And this is why, going back to what we were saying earlier, we must focus on resilience. That's our shield against such events. So this kind of brings us to the core of our resilience discussion. If we assume a breach will happen, our most critical line of defense becomes our ability to recover from such an event. This is where a modern business continuity and disaster recovery, or commonly known as BCDR strategy, comes into play. So think of your backups as the ultimate insurance policy against such an event. If you have a clean, isolated, and a tested copy of all your data, the attacker's primary leverage holding your data is gone. They can no longer extort you if you can confidently restore your own systems. And going back to our earlier point, this is why they typically go after the backups first. So our strategy, therefore, must be to make our backups untouchable. A strong DR plan is what turns a potential catastrophic event into essentially a manageable incident, right? And it's really about ensuring the business survival. So for the key stakeholders on this call, folks that are responsible for the technology part of the business, it's important to know that how much of the business survival is kind of in your circle of influence. So, okay, how do we build this? This is where Microsoft Azure or Azure Cloud comes into play. We'll focus on two core services today and think of them as a 1-2 punch. There's the Azure Site Recovery, or known as ASR. This is for availability. It is your hot site in the cloud, away from your production environment, ready to take over and keep the business running in case of an incident. Number two, or punch two, is the Azure Backup. This is the integrity or data integrity tool, right? It is a secure air-gapped vault, which ensures your data is recovered and its data is recoverable and it's clean and it's uncorrupted. And it's also tested. So together, they keep the lights on, ensure your data is trustworthy if such an incident is to take place. So these Azure solution provides resiliency against, it's not just the malware part of this. It's important to note that these incidents could be natural disasters, fires, floods, storms. We all are aware of the sort of Mother Nature kind of wrapping up some of the incidents. over the last maybe year or so. And it's also against infrastructure failure. All these hyperscalers like AWS, Azure, GCP are absolutely resilient, but at times, and I've been doing this for 10 plus years just on Azure, uh, I cannot recall how many times customers just naturally feel a sense of security that I'm hosted on a hyperscaler like AWS or Azure, and hence why I am immune to power outages or hardware meltdowns. So I think the best strategy here is you build your own internal DR, BCDR strategy on top of the very resilient services that you subscribe to today, or what you may have built out in your own data centers. So let's talk about how does it look like, right? Like, how do we make this real? How a use case typically look like? Many of you here today are probably running critical applications in your own premise data centers, maybe some cloud. Traditionally, protecting these environments meant building and maintaining a costly second DR site. It's still the case with many of our customers. With the Azure, or the inclusion of Azure to complement your on-premise, the model changes completely. As this diagram kind of shows you, that you can use ASR to continuously replicate your on-premise servers. And this is at a VM level, whether they're typical or virtual, directly onto Azure. So this becomes your DR site, ready to be activated on a moment's notice, and for you to be able to cut over the traffic to it. That's a sort of top end of the network layer. Simultaneously, Azure Backup sends secure copies of your data to an isolated recovery service vault. This is essentially a hybrid approach, giving you the best of both worlds. So you're offsite in a robust environment, without the capital expenses of running these VMs 24 hours around the clock, and having the ability to rehydrate these machines with your true tried tested backup. You essentially now have a physical DR facility that you can call your own. I'll take a pause here. Maybe if you have any questions around the room, um, we can take those two right now, given that we're doing pretty good with time. Okay. Uh, Great. Okay, so let's break down the services a little bit more. We'll start with ASR. So ASR is it's all about speed. RPO, which for the ones that don't know, it's how much data you lose or you can stand to lose. A lot of time organizations will have RPO targets. And with ASR, it's near zero. We're talking minutes, even seconds, depending on how you set up ASR and the connectivity you have between the two sites. RTO stands for how fast you can come back online. And most of the time, organizations will have measures around those as well. With Azure Backup, that's minutes. It's an automated recovery plan that handles all the complexity for you. It's actually sort of a click through portal as you're switching over your site in the ESR world. And the killer feature here is like it's non-disruptive, right? So you can be running DR drills while your production is up without having to impact anything on the production side. So what that means is my production is running, let's say mid-business hours, and I want to really test out if all my backups and my secondary site can be brought up online, and how long does that take? So you can spin up those VMs in your Azure site and click through essentially a DR drill without having to cut over the traffic. So the entire environment comes online. You make sure that you're in an isolated bubble within the Azure while you test this. And all this should have zero impact on the production itself. So this is how we recommend our customer build that confidence and show it back to their business that, hey, we have the ability to test our DR plan, our DR strategy, and our backup. And we've got a report that shows that, this is how long it takes for us to cut over. And we've packed this every quarter for the last year. That brings about confidence, that brings about the sort of zero impact to business strategy that you want to put in place. Switching over to the backup, this is where I think the Azure backup really shines. The core idea is, once again, that the recovery services vault. Think of this as a fortress of all your backups. It's completely one way, so it's isolated from your main network. It's not in the same purview of an attacker. If they were to get an admin password to your environment, they still can't touch the backups. And then we add more layers of armor where we have things like soft delete. So what that does is it undo the delete of a backup. So, given that they could be in for a very long time, you can have a soft delete in place where you can undo the delete procedures of your important files as well. And then we've got the immutability, which is the ultimate defense that makes your backups cryptographically impossible for anybody to change them or mess around with them or add or take away critical code pieces away from them, because this is protected at an crypto level. So yeah, just a key takeaway, your backup is immutable. That makes it a game changer against defeating any ransomware because you have an immutable backup copy sitting in a different location altogether. So taking a step back, what is required? A modern resiliency strategy. It shouldn't be effective. It needs to be financially smart. Moving your BCDR to Azure delivers a significant benefit on cost side. If you were to compare this with your typical on-premise backup strategy, having a secondary site is not as simple. The cost is typically not as cost calculation is not as simple as n+1, or it's 2x the cost of production. There is generally a lot of other pieces that go into play, and the cost of having a A and B site could be far more than just the 2x sum of your current production. So the TCO side, the most obvious win is the elimination of the secondary data center. We do this with our customers all the time. They're looking into their backup strategy, their DR strategy, and they're generally going out looking at another provider to host their servers, which they will put in there. So all that capital expense on hardware, power, maintenance, remote hands, that just goes away. And you're shifting that CapEx model to now more an operational model, right? And let's not forget that those VMs that are sitting on the secondary site, they don't have to be active at all times. So you're really paying for them as they come online, and you cut the traffic over to them. And the ROI piece is even more compelling because the cost of implementing such a solution is minuscule based off of how easy ESR and backup is set, compared to, let's say, a multi-week outage or a multi-million-dollar ransom payment that you would have ended up paying out. So this is just, once again, not about IT expenses. This should be viewed as more strategic investment that protects your revenue, your brand, and ultimately your entire business. I really want to call out how this resiliency story is not just for on-premise. We work with many of our customers who have a multi-cloud strategy today, where they may have workloads, some of the workloads running on AWS, some GCP, some in Azure. They're potentially managing separate native DR tools for each of these clouds, and they could be very complex, could be very inefficient, especially when you come down to testing these BCDR plans. So Azure Site Recovery, a very robust tool, can simply just consolidate all of that. You can use it as a single unified DR hub by replicating your VMs from all over the other clouds or your on-premise, and you consolidate your disaster recovery strategy onto a single platform. This gives you a single pane of glass for managing, testing, failover, regardless of where your applications are running, existing or the new ones. And it's really just about bringing some level of sanity and order to otherwise a very complex environment, and the ability to show back to the business that our plan does work, irrespective of what our future strategy may look like, right? We know beyond just the BCDR conversations, we are typically having conversations with our customers about consolidation, moving from on-prem to cloud, they could be going to a poly-cloud scenario. So your backup strategy doesn't really need to evolve because that state that you start out with could be carried through all different iterations as you change your business and technology over the coming years. Um, Great. So, what is a great BCDR strategy, right? Where should we start off? How should we look at it? First thing, it should be aligned with business. You have to go back and you have to define those RTOs and RPOs. Um, you need to think about, how do we, when the cutover happens, what needs to come online first, which applications are sort of the step one, step two, step threes. And second, you harden the tech itself. You make sure that you've turning on immutability. You're using multi-factor authentication to avoid some of those lateral threat vectors where folks come into an environment as a single user, then manage to elevate their status, and then just kind of take over the whole network. And third, and most important, is test regularly, right? A DR plan you haven't tested is just theory. It's just a piece of paper and an email unless you test it. So we at CDW we help our customer run those automated drills. Uh, we help them build that muscle memory of such an event. And finally, the most important thing is don't forget the identity. We have we should have a recovery plan for Active Directory, which is a prime target for our attackers. And we have, just over the last week, I've helped a couple of customers kind of put that disaster recovery plan for their Active Directory as well. So that's a prime target, something to think about. Our role in such an engagement is we bring the people, we bring the process, we bring the technology together in one room. We are the top tier Microsoft Azure expert and MSP status partner. So our team essentially has many folks like myself who live and breathe this stuff. Uh, this could be a simple for us to step in and do an assessment of your current state deployment. And then we can get into things like how to deploy this differently, share some playbooks and drills with you. And we also have the ability to take some of this on as managed services. So think of this as, us as having the scale and the know-how to kind of help you bridge the gap between your infrastructure, security, and applications teams today. And, we're not just looking to deploy tools. We view this as a full program with the ability to sort of assess, build a playbook, have a test plan in place, and we work very closely with Microsoft to ensure that all that we're building really aligns not only just with your business and your RTOs and RPOs, but also with Microsoft best practices. And yeah, just to summarize, the threat, this is real, right? This is I'm sure you've all heard about this. This is very common now. The outages are devastating for most customers. We know a few very large names in Canadian space recently. Um, with the right strategy and the right type of tools, you can truly build a resilient organization that is not potentially going to break the bank. And we would say to you as a takeaway is, you take a few questions. If you were to take a few questions back to your team, is you want to ask yourself, are my backups, am I truly confident about my backups that I'll be able to use them in a case of an outage? Especially if we were to be hit tonight, could we recover fast enough? And if the answer is yes to all that, have we practiced our cyber recovery plan as a drill? So if there's any doubts, this is your signal to act. We're here to help you through that conversation and that journey, not only just on the tech side, but also on the business side. But with that, I will open the floor for some questions, if there are any. It's a quiet crowd today, and it's not even Friday yet. Folks, don't be shy. If you don't want to come off mute, just drop the question in the chat. We will take that as well. All right, going once. Well, with that, the final step would be please reach out to your CDW specialist or your account relationship holder. They know how to find folks like myself, Bhupinder and Sylvie, who are in the call today, and we can get this conversation started fairly quickly. This is just a sort of primer on, and this came through as the lay of the land, the things that we're seeing ramp up quite quickly in 2025. So this is our attempt to try and have you think about the right strategies and think of what sort of next steps you want to take. But with that, I will stop sharing. Take a look at the chat. Okay, chat is good. Chat is clear. I don't have anything else to share, Jamie. If you have any parting thoughts, you may want to come off mute.
I think we're good. I don't see any questions. So that means you had a perfect presentation. So thank you everyone for joining. And yeah, as Omar said, just reach out if you have any questions and someone will be available to help you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.